everybody, and welcome to a PGS Moving Image Review of Ahsoka Season 1, Episode 5 and 6. I'm your host, Mmmm, and this morning it's my pleasure to have with us today, of course, Catherine. Catherine, how are you today?
Good.
Well, it is wonderful to have you here. And certainly, this Ahsoka series has shown us a lot of different things that I thought I was never going to see in live action, Catherine, especially with episode 5. And it was a very special situation because I can't remember the last time that we had the opportunity to go see an episode of a current series in a movie theater, Catherine. Can you remember the last time that we've had anything like that?
Uh, for a TV series, I think they did that. Didn't HBO do that with Game of Thrones? Maybe I can't remember. I don't know. I don't really pay attention to those things. I don't even know where those tickets become available because they just. I mean, they didn't sell them; they were giving them away for free, and they just were out like that. So.
Yeah, it was quite, Star Wars.com put out an advertisement for it for episode 5, right after the end of episode 4, which we did review right here on the channel, the Burnettwork, and on Positive Fandom. Of course, we saw that incredible scene with Anakin speaking to Ahsoka. And of course, that next episode, I had kind of didn't want the next episode necessarily to be all Ahsoka, but it was. And I guess from a story point of view, they almost had to tell you what was going on and explain exactly what was going on with Ahsoka. So I think it was very interesting and maybe an excellent move for Filoni, for Star Wars, Lucasfilm, to decide to have this fan event where fans could go into the theater and watch episode 5. And Catherine, there were scenes that if you've watched the Clone Wars, which I'm pretty sure you have, I know I've watched them, and Rebels, we got to see scenes in live action that I didn't even know we were going to see. I had no idea we were going to see young Ahsoka with Anakin. And, clearly this was what I call a sort of a showcase of Ahsoka's life, and seeing her in live action from as a young, pretty much a child, to let's say her age now, was remarkable. I just can't imagine how good this must have looked on the screen, on the big screen, with the lightsaber fights and the locations. We even got to see a Death Watch Mandalorian. Certainly there were very interesting scenes, but I personally, Catherine, did not know that Ahsoka had this inner conflict. Did that surprise you, that she had an inner conflict where she felt she needed to have this resolved? Were you surprised by that in the series when you saw it in episode 5?
I don't think she does. I think that was just Dave's excuse for putting all that, showing us all that in live action. Because the key issue there is Anakin's trying to get her to reconcile with this. Like, because the last thing that Baylan Skoll tells her before he knocks her off the cliff is that, oh, I know Anakin was Darth Vader, and you and him have a legacy of violence and death and destruction even before he became Vader. And so that seems to be why the version of Anakin she initially sees is showing her all of these instances of just death and destruction. But I felt that her resolve when she says, "Oh, I choose to live," and all this stuff is something that was already iterated about Ahsoka, like when she first chose to reject the offer to rejoin the Jedi, and when in Rebels, when she's Fulcrum and all this stuff, or when she first goes to the World Between Worlds in the Rebels series. Like, so I felt it was kind of a corny, half-assed excuse just to do all this in live action. 'Cause, yeah, it looks cool, but to me it was just kind of fan service because it didn't move the story forward. It didn't seem like Baylan apparently thought she was dead, as they confirmed in this episode, because he thought, "Yeah, I killed her. I pushed her off the cliff. What do you want? Like, what do you want me to say?" So it's like, okay, they tease the World Between Worlds kind of with the logos a bit on this show, and it's like, okay, they're going to show us this. It's like, yeah, it's really cool. They de-aged Anakin this time, and I'm like, yeah, this stuff looks neat in live action, but I'm not sure why it's here, because the show had a pretty decent pace up to this point, and then it's like, well, let's go on this huge clip show. And then finally we get to the end, which also, admittedly, with the Purgle looked really cool live action, even though I'm still not on board fully with the idea of the Purgle. But I don't know. I just wasn't really connecting with it, because even in some of the flashbacks, you notice how there was a lot of smoke and clouds. Like, you're only able to see a little bit, and I think that's kind of the show's budget restraints getting in the way. Like when you see some of the clones coming out of the dust, but you can't really tell what the environment is. I'm like, where are they exactly? Until I saw some Twi'leks run by. I'm like, oh, this must be the Battle of Ryloth. And then you get to see Rex in live action for the first time. And it's like you hear Tamora Morrison's voice, at least that's there. And it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. But yeah, I didn't really connect with it as much because it kind of seemed like it was obvious what Anakin was doing, and then he's coaxing with this. So I'm like, okay, it looks neat, but it doesn't really have anything to do with what Ahsoka and all the characters are doing. It's not like she was having this interpersonal conflict before she fell into the world between worlds. It's only like now that she's there, we gotta do this. It's like, you know, and the visuals like that look really cool. Like them fighting on the blue crystal bird, like that type of stuff would have looked amazing to see on a big screen, no doubt. I can see why they picked this episode for that reason. But as far as the greater story is concerned and the whole context of the whole series, I didn't feel it was really necessary.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. To be honest with you, knowing how Ahsoka has behaved since she left the Order, and the idea that they had said that her going through that last event was as if she had gone through the trials. You know, they that's exactly maybe their exact words. You know, when she walked away, more or less. And obviously, there was a spectacular effort in showing these episodes, this particular episode, episode 5, where we see this is production value that's spectacular. The lightsabers glowing in the smoke, you know, the shadows of Ahsoka and Anakin, which we can see here. This looks wonderful. But this inner conflict, I don't really think that we had any evidence of it being indicated anywhere. She certainly didn't have it when in her book, which we've all listened to or read in the Ahsoka book. She's very, very confident. And I thought she had dealt with any issues she might have had. So that did surprise me. And they kind of spent a lot of time on it in the episode. Another thing that kind of surprised me, Catherine, and you did also mention the way that the world between worlds looked. You and I had discussed what did it look like in the Clone Wars, and what did you see when you were in the world between worlds? What were some of the pictures, or let's say portals, that you saw? And you mentioned to me, you reminded me that it was from previous films. You know, you would see different events going on in these different portals. That's what I kind of thought maybe they were going to do. But this seemed to be more focused on Ahsoka's personal journey that I guess Filoni wanted to share. And I understand him wanting to do this, because I don't know how many seasons there will be of Ahsoka, but I guess he figures if I can put this in here and show people what Ahsoka has been like through the years, what her upbringing was like right here in this episode, people can understand it. But I would have liked to have seen this a little bit sooner. Catherine, do you think this would have worked if we had seen this a little bit sooner in the series?
Well, no, because the primary reason for doing it in the context of the show is that she's suddenly having this interpersonal conflict, and the only time she ever would have had that was at the end of season 2 of Rebels, when she finds out that Anakin is Vader. Like, that's the only part. That's when it kind of gives her pause initially. But because that is the last episode of the season, you don't see her again until season 4, when she gets pulled into the world between worlds by Ezra, and she's immediately saying, well, we can't tamper with this or whatever. So you never really get to dive into her true reaction and processing the revelation that Anakin is Vader. So the idea that this is still bothering her, which is, there was no evidence of that at all, and it just felt like something they kind of contrived, came up with for the sake of, doing this in live action.
And what's even more interesting, to add to what you're saying, is while she's fighting Baylan, it looks like she's fighting, her butt off. I mean, she's struggling, she's clawing at him, and clearly she's, she hurt her hand, which we all witnessed, but she didn't give up for a second. She was fighting as hard as she could. And as far as I'm concerned, it is true that Baylan may have felt, well, she's injured, and, I don't really want to fight somebody who's injured or, can't fight back properly. I don't know whether he believed she was, this is just my personal feelings, but I don't know whether he believed she was it. I think he would have liked to have thought that she had survived somehow, but it was a really long fall down to the bottom where that water was, or however high that cliff was. It looks really precipitous. So, it didn't really seem as if she could survive that. But it was interesting that he chose to go this way. And the lucky people, I think there was only 10 screens in the United States, at least. I don't even know if this was overseas, that it was a fan event. This fan event said that it looked incredible. It really did have that great quality to it. The production value was wonderful. And I'm sure this was a treat, as you said, Catherine. But I think it also might have been kind of at the expense of the show, because there was so much focus on looking at these scenes, which, however entertaining they were, didn't really seem to fit into the story. But this is, what Filoni chose, and I'm certainly, understand his point of view is, I may never get this chance again as well. Why not go ahead and put it in here? The other thing that I was going to say is we did see some, you mentioned we got to see the clones. We also got to see Death Watch Mandalorians, which I really enjoyed seeing in the episode as well. Hera, of course, arrives at the location, and she is looking for Ahsoka. And that's not a surprise, of course. She's wondering where Ahsoka is. And of course, her son is saying, don't you hear these lightsabers? Now, a lot of people are saying that if you can hear the lightsabers, are they really in the world between worlds? What's going on? Was this in Ahsoka's head? What do you think, Catherine, about people interpreting it as not really being the world between worlds as we understand it to be?
Well, there certainly was no entrance to the world between worlds. We saw what the entrance kind of looked like in Rebels with that temple and how very specific it is and how you get in. So I don't see how falling off a cliff would make that happen unless somebody opened a portal and snatched her in there. But as we saw, that wasn't really Anakin. That was like the episode was called Shadow Warrior. It's like Baylan, that's because that's the last thing she was thinking, and she falls in and she has her own best thoughts about Anakin. That's what she sees when she's in there, which is why Anakin's kind of both mixed light, dark. Like at the very end, when she finally says, I choose light, Anakin's face turns from being kind of almost somewhat demonic in a way with the red eyes and everything. It turns back to being regular. See, you've learned your lesson. But the fact that Jason can hear it, on the other side of it, it's like, well, if it is the world between worlds and it's legit, then maybe because Kanan was his father and was really tapped in, with respecting things like the Bendu and that kind of stuff, maybe he has that extra connection and could sense it. But because he tells Hera repeatedly, can you hear it? And at first she doesn't seem to, but then she kind of listens to him and decides, okay, I'll fly down. We'll see what we can find. And it's not clear exactly how they find Ahsoka, because we see that she's underwater eventually and they pull her out. And I'm not sure exactly how they must have just done another scan and found her, which begs the question, did she just fall in the water? And because, Jedi can survive things like that. We've seen them survive crazy things in the past. So is the idea that she just fell into the water and this is all in her head, and that it's maybe just witch magic or something? Like she thinks she's there because Baylan's teasing. Because he seemed to have an idea of what was going to happen. I didn't buy that, because if he wanted to kill her, he could have sliced her with a lightsaber by just simply bringing it down on her as he kicked her off the cliff, but he didn't. And like he said in the latest episode, he misses the Jedi Order. He just doesn't like what it became. So I'm not sure if he really wanted to kill. I get the sense that he kind of knew something was going to happen. And we know that temple where where they were using the map to look at, the Night Sister Temple or whatever, we saw the same thing in Clone Wars Season 6 when Mother Talzin is trying to do that crazy, what is it, that soul-sucking thing to try and extend her life, and it's also aiming towards the stars, and it's the same type of hieroglyphs, the same type of setup. So if this place has some type of world between worlds connection, that place might as well. So it could be, witch magic or whatever it is. We don't really know. Maybe there is another, it could be just another way of getting into the portal, but we don't know how she got there.
Yeah, it's something to think about. I mean, we were told, or at least have been told over and over again, that, that the Night Sisters have a different way of being able to use the Force. And certainly it wouldn't surprise me, at all, if they were able to do things that we have never seen before. And certainly maybe we are seeing certain things that we haven't seen before in the series. But what was also kind of very interesting was that after Hera rescues Ahsoka, Ahsoka sort of comes back and, she says that they have to travel and get Ezra. This is kind of a point. It's very anticlimactic because this is kind of what we've been waiting for since episode, the first episode, if you will. But she, all of a sudden now the Purgles are going to sort of be the way that they get to where they have to go to meet Ezra, wherever that is. And her comment about, where Huyang says, well, where are we going? And Ahsoka says, well, I don't know, and I just was very surprised to hear her say she doesn't know, because I almost felt that at this point, because of what had happened, because of the vision, let's say her vision, if we're going to call it that, was so profound that her response might be, well, it's just the will of the Force is where we're going to go. We're just however we go. But to like her, I don't, it was almost like her attitude had changed a little bit. She was a little different. But I didn't really care for the I don't know comment, because that a lot of times when, people write scripts and they put in I don't know, I think that that's kind of like not the best effort put forward. What did you think, Catherine, with her response? Do you think she should have, just been truthful and said, I saw a vision and, it's telling me that I need to move forward, or something to that degree?
Well, maybe because they don't really focus on what her reaction is when she gets out, because it's kind of like in the Mortis trilogy where they kind of got stuck out of the space-time continuum, but as far as everyone else is concerned, they're only gone for a second. Supposedly, the same thing seems to be going on with her. She fell into the water, was unconscious, and then they pulled her out of the water, and it wasn't too much later. But the fact that Jason can hear it suggests that it's not merely in her head, or there's something going on there. And perhaps she doesn't really have a grasp on what it is yet, that she's not even going to bother telling Huang this. Because she's like, okay, it was weird, but we have to focus on the mission at hand, which is to, rescue Sabine, find Thrawn and Ezra, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it is very different. And then, of course, that other interesting part is that now she has changed her robe from, sort of Ahsoka the Gray to now Ahsoka the White, this sort of Gandalf similarity. Did you feel that there was this growth, this incredible change in Ahsoka, that now she's no longer wearing gray robes, but she's wearing white robes? Because I remember Gandalf falling for a long time. It seemed like forever. How did you interpret that?
They already did that in Rebels, where she goes from wearing gray to white. So it's like they're reiterating what's already been reiterated, that she's changed, which is why it's kind of regressing to, oh, we're going to make it seem like she hasn't gone on this journey before. It's like, well, she already has. It's like the proper time to have this episode or this happen to her would have been in Rebels, when Ezra pulls her through the portal, because she's just found out that Anakin is Vader. That would have been the time for her to see him showing up and giving her lessons, because he's a shadow warrior, which means it's not necessarily, it might not be his spirit, because at this point in the timeline, Anakin's already died. It could just be a reflection of her memory of him or whatever. So that would have made a lot more sense to put it back there than putting it here. It just felt like, again, Filoni wanted to do it, and he didn't really think about whether it really fit in the story, unless they bring it back somehow in the next 2 episodes. But I doubt it, with the amount of story and the amount of characters that they have to juggle now with everything going on in this next episode. They got to wrap it up in 2 episodes, and certainly it'll be like another cliffhanger situation. But I don't think that this whole World Between Worlds thing is going to come back necessarily in this season. And it hasn't really been confirmed. I assume they're doing another season, unless the story's going to continue in Mandalorian season 4, or maybe another Boba Fett season, or the Skeleton Crew might be a part of it. I don't know, or the movie eventually.
Yeah, that's a good point. And certainly, it's something to think about in regards to whether is going to be another season. I think that now at this point, she's on the path to finding Ezra. And, even though the Purgles are amazing to look at, it did feel very anticlimactic, because the Purgles have sort of been hanging out there. And I guess they've been waiting for her to approach them, or whatever it is. But Ahsoka and Huyang hop into the Purgle, but Hera does not join them. Were you surprised by that?
No, because Hera's entire command is at stake, and she doesn't want to lose it, because she doesn't really have the authority to say, oh, screw you, I'm just going to take it. She still has to own up to it. But story-wise, I know that going into the show, one of the criticisms that critics had who were given all the episodes to watch is that Hera didn't really have much screen time and didn't really have much to do. She's just kind of there. So I don't know if they're gonna, again, what they're gonna build that to. And given that Hera was stressing that Ahsoka needed to come back with her to be her witness, and she doesn't, means that I'm guessing Hera is going to be vindicated by something tells me the villains are going to win or halfway win. They're going to get back to the galaxy in some way, and that's how they're going to find out that, oh, Hera and Ahsoka were right. That seems to be the direction that they're going. So, yeah, I'm guessing that's why she didn't go. And we still didn't see any sign of Zeb in this new episode either. So, people keep saying, oh, this is like Rebels season 5, and I'm like, is it? It's like, yeah, the Rebels characters are there, but we're not really seeing a lot of them who could and should be there. Like, again, it's already been established that Zeb is in that same squadron, but he's not there yet. And Hera, they didn't have to write that plot point of Hera having to go to the Senate. They just did, almost as an excuse to not have her go on the mission. And so it's like, okay, it would have been nicer if they went and all got, because the whole Thrawn thing was started in the Rebels show, so it stands to reason that they should be the ones coming together to solve it. And maybe they will whenever, again, whichever season they continue this showing, because I think Filoni's already confirmed that Thrawn is supposed to be the big bad of the movie. So, they're not like going to kill him off in the next 2 episodes.
Well, it's interesting because when Ahsoka went into this, let's say this, as I said, vision with Anakin, at least that's what I'm calling it, I thought she was going to ask him, how does she defeat Thrawn? Because this is a very different situation. She's now up against Thrawn, the Night Sisters, Balin and his apprentice, and only God knows whoever else she might be up against. It's a lot to fight against, Catherine. And I thought that somehow maybe Anakin could tell her something that was relevant or that she needed to hear versus, just keep fighting or don't give up. That I thought maybe he had some advice that might have been very, very important to her in this battle to come forward. But it didn't turn out that way, which is fine. But I thought maybe that's why he appeared even. So at the end of this episode, they Huang and Ahsoka head out to intercept or go to the planet wherever Ezra and everybody went to. Any last thoughts about episode 5 that you wanted to share or wanted to comment on?
The very ending when she kind of communes with the Purgle and they agree to take her there, and they're talking about how, oh yeah, the ancient hyperspace lanes were based on Purgle's transportation or their routes, and I'm thinking, well, this is kind of interesting and opens the door to a lot of questions as to why maybe other people, I wonder if other people from the Star Wars galaxy have used that to try and go populate other galaxies or whatnot, because the map had to be charted from Dathomir to the Star Wars galaxy, but somebody would have had to return to Dathomir or return to Peridia, the name of the planet Thrawn's on, with the map to finish charting the path. Because as we see when she's traveling with the Purgle, they're like inside their ship, inside the map, so they're not able to chart anywhere where they're going. And even when you're in hyperspace, you can't see the stars to chart where you're going either. So somehow the witches were able to do that, and theoretically, since they would have had to go back to the planet to chart that map, the witches should have already had the coordinates. So it's like, I'm wondering if other people use this to travel, or how many people know this, that Purgle can be used for that. Because it's like, well, not to mention, I would think that since Purgle are able to jump to hyperspace, that there would be a whaling industry around this. So it's like one of those little things. It's like, well, if the witches know this and Ahsoka knows this, and it seems like a lot of other people would probably know that, hey, there's these passageways that we could follow to, but that's another thing. But
yeah, it is something to think about going forward with this. Certainly, it is something that crossed my mind as well. And as we go into episode 6, we do see, and I could be mixing up the end of 5 with 6, but Ahsoka talks about, she's speaking to Huang. I hope I'm saying the right one. And she talks about the history of the galaxy, or Huang starts to say, do you remember when I told you about the history of the galaxy? 1, 2, and 3, parts 1, 2, and 3. And Ahsoka's like, yeah, maybe you should tell me the story of part one. I really wanted to hear what Huang was going to say. And of course, I'm guessing part one might be the uh, episodes 4, 5, and 6. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing it might be. What did you think? Are we going to get, kind of like something that has the history of the galaxy? Does that exist? Is it written somewhere, Catherine?
I don't know if it would actually be written anywhere, but I mean, the fact that the witches knew that this was based on ancient hyperspace trails, the fact that Ahsoka seemed to be kind of familiar with it, begs the question: have there been any other, travelers, like outbound flight, so to speak, following the Purgle to go off into channeling them to go off into different galaxies? Because one of the things that Ezra tells us in this new episode is that he didn't know where he was going when he took Thrawn. He just, because he had saved the Purgle earlier in the series, and he has that special connection with animals like Ezra or like Ahsoka does. They came to help him, but he didn't know where they were going. And the fact that they say that the planet they arrive at is like, you see the Purgle graveyard, and that's why you have all the bones surrounding the rings of the planet. Um, that's kind of okay. It's like, well, that's why the witches are there. I guess they must have originally, because it begs kind of like, what came first? Is it that the witches originated from Peridia and then they traveled to the Star Wars galaxy with the Purgle, or was it the other way around and they started from the Star Wars galaxy and traveled out to Peridia? We don't really know. So, point being that, is it too much of a coincidence that the Purgle just happened to take them a planet where all the the witches have been living, and took Thrawn and them to the planet where the witches are? Because it's clear that the Purgle are very intelligent, and it's clear that when they came to save Ezra in Rebels, that they knew he was trying to get rid of Thrawn, but yet they took him somewhere where he's going to find a lot of allies on this planet. So that's another thing that you got to wonder about, because they've made it clear that the Purgle are very intelligent in thinking this out. So do they know something we don't? Like when Ahsoka says, "Oh, Sabine was fated to open the map. It was fated to happen. Like, it's the will of the Force." And we find out from what Thrawn and the Night Sisters are doing, how this ties back into what's going on in Mandalorian and what's going on in the sequel trilogy. So maybe it's all fated to get to this same end game, and maybe the Purgle, because they're so intelligent and tuned with the Force, know something about that, and maybe it's deliberate why they took them here, because it's almost like maybe they could see it too. You don't know.
Yeah, and I'm almost wondering. It is very interesting because there is so much dependence on the Night Sisters in these episodes. Certainly, the Night Sister had to activate the Wayfinder, and then it had to be at a location, this temple or place where the Night Sisters were, in order to activate the Wayfinder and show the map. And then certainly, this is their ancient planet, Peridia. Where the Night Sisters have been for maybe thousands of years, right? So a lot of this is based on their folklore and history. I'm very happy that we are seeing so much more of the Night Sisters. I wasn't even quite sure what we would see when we got there. And of course, in these few shots, it's Huang with Ahsoka as they arrive there. And Catherine, what did you think of the visuals? Because I keep hearing people talk about how spectacular the visuals were as the Purgles are traveling through hyperspace. It does look it looks different from the other journeys through hyperspace. What did you think of it?
I think the reason it looks different is because it's a much, like it's mentioned early in the season, the reason they had to build the specific hyperspace rings because normal hyperdrives can't make the journey, which is why Thrawn's ship can't simply. It's not that the hyperdrive's damaged; it's that they can't make the jump back. One, because they need the coordinates, and two, it's not a strong enough hyperdrive to do it. And because this is such an exceptionally faster speeds or whatever, and perhaps also because this is more of a natural hyperdrive, because it's not mechanical, that maybe that's why it looks that way.
Yeah, it's spectacular looking. It looks really cool. I like the colors. They made it look different. It looks otherworldly or other galaxy, whatever way you want to describe it. It looks amazing. I mean, I think that's a fantastic way to show it. And kind of before we get to Thrawn, I kind of am doing these pictures out of order. I was looking for a picture of these ladies because they end up obviously meeting these Darthomirian witches, the sisters. There they are. So many pictures away. Sorry, guys. And I gotta say, I love how creepy and how they almost look. There are certain scenes where they're moving around and you can't. They're almost blurry as they move, or they they have kind of like they're on another plane of existence. Catherine, what do you think of how they're kind of shown? I know that Balin keeps calling them witches, and Balin obviously wants to harness some of this witch energy. But Catherine, did you like the depiction of the Darth Marion witches? Did you think that this is how they should look? I mean, I remember seeing them in the Clone Wars and in other depictions. I loved it. What did you think of how they were depicted?
I thought it was a much more accurate translation from animation to live action than the Grand Inquisitor was in Kenobi. It was like they actually did their homework this time. They look really creepy. They look gorgeous in the seeing that stark red color against that mostly monotonous grayscale just makes it look that much more striking. Kind of like I remember the teaser posters they put out for Last Jedi where everybody's wearing like these stark red clothing against like this white charcoal background. I'm like, wow, that looks really striking, even though it's not in the movie. And so getting to see something like that here, I'm like, that looks so cool. And so, yeah, I thought they were appropriately creepy. Yeah, I would kind of knock it that they shouldn't really be speaking Galactic Basic because, you know, you're on a completely different planet, and this is implied that this is from perhaps millions of years even before the settlement of the other galaxy or whatnot, unless Thrawn taught him that way, or maybe they just did it for him, who knows. But I would have preferred if they were speaking their own kind of language at that point. But it is really neat. And then when you see like this massive citadel, if you will, that they call the catacombs, that there's all these catacombs down underneath it. And again, we know how evil the hierarchy of the Knights of the Mother Talzin and all of those really are, how they don't really respect the Night Sisters or the Night Brothers for that matter. So it was really cool to see finally them moving in another direction. Like it's not just, you know, Palpatine and the Empire again. It's something different. And I kind of wish that this would get more attention in other, like I was so fascinated by that whole race and that whole magic or whatnot in Clone Wars, and I'm surprised that they put it in the Clone Wars series given there's so much going on at that time in galactic history. And so to see it in live action with its more attention to focus, I'm really happy that we got to see.
Yeah, I was happy with it too. And certainly this was a special effect, Catherine, that I approve of. I was all on board with the notion that they have this sort of phasing in and out of you know, our, let's say, I don't even know how to say it, realm or but I liked that. Clearly they are on a different plane. There's something else going on with them. They're communicating differently. And Balin is freaked out. And as I said, I believe, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more than me just kind of briefly asking you, which I'm doing now, that Balin wants to harness some of that energy. In fact, I think that he is maybe the most sensitive individual there, who knows that there's something deeper within the planet and maybe even around there that's going on. You had mentioned you thought there might even be a creature there. Can Balin, can he do it? Can he go ahead and, you know, take over and get this power? He wants this force power. It's clear Balin wants to be one of the strongest, if not the strongest force user of all time. That's what I'm getting from him. And I think that he is very patient, and perhaps he sees this as his path. He believes in this. Do you see Balin, and I do know that Ray Stevenson has unfortunately left us, but do you see the character Balin going down that path successfully, or will the Night Sisters get in his way?
I think the fact that they've been keeping his motives a secret this long suggests to me that his character will probably be around a bit more than. I would be very surprised because if they were going to kill him in the next 2 episodes, I would have assumed that they would have revealed his true motives much earlier in the season, so that way it comes as more of a surprise. But I like the fact that he's talking to Hati about how, he's talking to her about how Sabine was trained, and because Hati was asking questions about Sabine, and she's like, and Hati's like, well, isn't that kind of how you train me? And he's like, and he snaps at her. He's like, no, I trained you to be better. And he admits, because she could see that he's kind of missing the Jedi, and he says, well, I miss the Jedi Order. I just don't like what they became. And he mentions the endless cycle of the fall of the Republic, the rise of the Empire, the fall of the Jedi, the rise of the Sith, the fall of the Empire, the rise of the Republic. And he says he wants to put a stop to all these cycles, implying that this endless cycle of devastation just needs to stop. Like kind of like before Rise of Skywalker came along, that was Snoke's motivation initially for doing what he was doing. He's like, we need to stop the Jedi from coming back because this is the cycle. Because at the height of their powers, the Jedi allowed the Sith to rise, create the Empire, wipe it out. It's like, no, we're putting an end to the cycle. But again, then Rise of Skywalker came along and completely, gerrymandered that. But here's Balin essentially making the same argument that Snoke was initially making, which is that this cycle is completely devastating. It's ongoing. And yes, we see that similar to Snoke, he is a dark side person in the sense he has no shame, murdering the innocent or mowing them down to get what he wants. But the question is, what type of power does he think is on this planet that he thinks he's going to harvest, and how exactly does he think that's going to help him, stop? Like, does he want to hijack the Project Necromancer? Does he want to, completely wipe it out? We're not really sure. So I don't think that they're going to kill him off in the next 2 episodes, because I doubt, with the amount of stuff going on in Peridia right now, that he would get the lion's share of the focus in these next 2 episodes. I think he would have to get the lion's share if you're going to kill him, because if they did kill him, it would be like a side thing. It would be just a severe disappointment, and no. So I am very intrigued by his motivations, and it's actually the thing that's actually intriguing me most about the series at this point.
I couldn't agree more. And I've heard perhaps the most compelling language from him, and passion about the Force. Catherine, there's passion here. And I love this notion that he left the Jedi Order. However, he still sees himself as a Force user, and he sees this as something that's important to him. And he loves this. And the words that he tells Hadi about could you, I think he says something like, something calls to me here. Can't you hear it? And it's just like, and that sent chills up my spine, Catherine. And then he says something like, something stirs here. Can't you see it? And I thought that was, if anything, telling us that obviously there's much more going on beneath the surface, as we both discussed. But yes, this passion is absolutely infectious. It's drawing me in. I'm on Team Balin, Catherine. I'm on Team Balin. And I don't even know his full story. I don't know where he's going to take Hadi. Hadi is a little kind of looking at this as in, I hope my master isn't losing it. But this might be one of the most intense moments of the episode for me, because right now we're seeing, as you said, the motivation, but also he is drawing us in. If you didn't suspect that there was something special about this planet, about the Night Sisters, about this very spot where they are, you absolutely have to believe there's something special now, because he's told us very clearly there's something big here and I'm going to get it. And I want him to succeed. If you're right about not being able to necessarily go deeper into his story, but it's fascinating, Catherine, to hear someone be so passionate about something. And to be honest with you, I felt like he was maybe the most passionate character, other than maybe the Night Sisters, who had an agenda, which I finally figured out. Although you did tell me about the necromancers, you were very clear about that was going to play a role in this episode. But I'm absolutely fascinated by what he plans to do. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he wanted to hijack those necromancers on the trip back, if he goes on that trip with them, or whatever his plan is. But I could see him being somebody who's so well versed in the Force, maybe not in using it the manner that the Night Sisters use it, but so well versed in the Force and well knows the folklore of the Force, that he can manipulate it in a way that others can't, just because he knows about it, just because he knows about different things that can be done that others are unaware of. Do you think, given his confidence, Catherine, given his awareness and knowledge, and that ability, and maybe even feeling that he has Hadi who will support him, between the two of them, can they do something as intense as what he's implying? Because he wants to change the galaxy, right?
Yeah, because obviously the New Republic is a terrible idea. It's like the Old Republic didn't work. The replacement Republic from the prequels didn't work. So let's start another New Republic. It's like they're not learning anything from their problems. And so Thrawn, and as we see, Thrawn and the other witches are very dismissive of Balin because he's a former Jedi, and no sooner than they leave the room, it's like, Thrawn initially is going to be honorable about it and say, oh, you can keep your promise to Sabine by letting her go after Ezra, but once she gets there, then you could kill him. And it's clear that Balin just pretends to go along with that order. He's not really interested in killing him for the sake of that, because he tells Hadi on the journey that, again, that this cycle needs to end. And he's smart. He knows that they don't trust him. He doesn't try and explain away he could have just as easily told Thrawn the moment they looked at him sideways that, hey, I don't like what the Jedi became. I joined them because for much the same reasons Anakin did. He thought they were going to be heroes and save people. He says, hey, I lost my faith in that a long time ago. But he didn't say that because he knows that they already have their own agenda. They're going to hate him no matter what, simply because he's a former Jedi. And he has some type of plan. I don't get, again, what he's actually going to do. And for those who are watching and may not remember, Project Necromancer was mentioned in the season finale of Mandalorian when Moff Gideon is conferring with the Shadow Council. And it was one of the Moffs on the council who said, well, what if Thrawn comes through and delivers Project Necromancer? And Gideon got really upset because he was making a power play for himself. He wasn't interested in that. He tried to shut that down. So whatever Necromancer is, because it's mentioned that we see the Night Sisters, they say they're loading stuff from the catacombs. And the crates they're taking up are shaped kind of like coffins. And we've seen from Clone Wars that the Night Sisters can reanimate like zombies. But I'm like, well, what's the target? And what is Thrawn hoping to do? Attack the New Republic? I'm like, I'm not really sure. So, and some of these stormtroopers, you look at them, and some of them almost look like some of them might be zombies. Like especially Enoch right there. He's kind of, standing. Very, it's like, why does he have this weird faceplate? Oh, some of the other ones that you can't really tell in that picture, but they have more broken armor, and their eyes are even like their visor plates are even more scarred over to the point it's as much of a joke as it is that you can't see out of these helmets, which they've sort of canonized by having stormtroopers say that. Even Luke says that when he first puts on a stormtrooper. Well, now when you really have cracks and splits and grime over, they can't see anything, but they almost look like zombies. And the allegation has been made that Thrawn is a really ship-shape, very disciplined type of guy. Why do all of his troops look that messed up? I get that they're stranded on this planet, but look how pristine the inside of this hangar is. Oh, but the troops look all that messed up and grimy and disgusting. Like, no, there's something going on there. I bet some of these might be zombies. But we'll see. And so Baylan, I'm, again, perplexed as to what his... And it seems like what he's talking about isn't necessarily Project Necromancer, because he says this planet has power, and Hati doesn't seem to sense it. He's like, don't you sense it? It's like this ancient thing. So I don't know exactly what he wants to do or how he thinks he's going to... Maybe he thinks because he says he wants to stop the cycle. Well, perhaps he knows... presumably he knows what Thrawn's endgame is. And he's like, well, that's going to continue the cycle. So maybe right now he's focused on just stopping Thrawn, stopping that next leg of the cycle. Perhaps. But we'll see.
Yeah, it seems to make sense that maybe some of these stormtroopers may be some sort of magic, because we already kind of saw that earlier in the season from the Night Sisters. And they look so glorious, Catherine, as you said, with their robes that just flow. It's almost as if they're floating on the surface of what we're seeing. It's really a beautifully done, mystical presence that they have together. And it's just mesmerizing to see them. You don't want to mess with them. Like this is kind of like, and they do kind of escort Sabine out, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute. And we get this, we hear the soldiers chanting Thrawn, 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 and it sounds very intense. It sounds very strong, but he kind of walks out there, and I'm not dogging Thrawn, and nor am I really dogging any of the way that Thrawn is depicted in here. I just noticed that, he feels like he's lost a little bit of the pep in his step. And I know that appearances are everything for this crew. You got a guy with a gold faceplate. They're wrapping their uniforms together as best as they can. And although the uniforms are wrapped, they're imperial, let's say post-imperial, whatever you want to call it, uniforms are wrapped, armor are wrapped in red bands, which might even suggest that it's an influence from, as you said, the Night Sisters. Thrawn seems a little bit slower, Is it just my imagination, or has he lost something? Has he lost a little bit of his mojo, Catherine?
Well, I think some of it is that things in animation, it's easy to make somebody super rigid all the time and unrealistic because it's animation. But in live action, again, they've been here for a long time. Maybe he's just kind of, he's here. I was fine with it. It's like, yeah, he doesn't look exactly perfect translation from the way he does in the cartoon, but I was fine with it. He's still clearly upholding his beliefs, like his sense of honor, so to speak, and how the fact that he didn't just kill Sabine. It's like, no, I'm going to honor the promise or whatever. So I was fine with it.
Yeah.
I'm remembering also, as I mentioned this, that the fact that the Shadow Council even knew what Thrawn was up to means that they must have been in league with Morgan Elsbeth, because it's revealed in this episode that she was telepathically communicating with the Night Sisters. I'm like, if that's the case, couldn't they have just telepathically told her the coordinates? And so we could have avoided the whole subplot about the map and saved time, so we could just get here. And because again, we only got 2 episodes left on this planet, and I would like to see more of that. But it also goes to show how incompetent the New Republic is. It's like, okay, so these Grand Moffs who are scattered throughout the galaxy are not only aware that Thrawn is alive, they're aware of what he's up to and what he's doing and have a plan. Morgan Elsbeth is aware of all of this. Clearly, she didn't tell Ahsoka any of this when Ahsoka cornered her in season 2 of Mandalorian, and yet, and like Hera mentioned when she was trying to appeal to the Senate that like, hey, look, you have a high-profile prisoner who's been kidnapped. They're going after Thrawn. Clearly, they know something, and nah, we're not really interested. I'm like, you're not really making a good argument to advocating your justified continual existence. It's like maybe it'd be a good thing if the New Republic falls and it'll be replaced by something more competent.
Yeah, you make a good point with that, Catherine. And as you said, I kind of looked at Thrawn's appearance as someone who is going to change over a certain number of years, and people aren't going to look the same. They're not going to be the same. So he finally, ironically, sees Sabine, who he says he recognized her, that name from before. And Sabine is a little snarky. She's got a little snarkiness to her because she's eager to find Ezra. But Sabine doesn't necessarily look like she's in a great position, even though she's made this pseudo bargain with Baylan, which, as we know, when you bargain with some people, the outcome is not what you want.
That really, Sabine continues to irritate me in this series. We had a deal. Are you really that stupid, lady? It's like, yeah, granted, he does eventually uphold his end of the deal, but like she sees when she's brought out of the cell that, oh, Thrawn's here, he's with the Night Sisters, they clearly have a plan. But now it's not that she's pretending to not be interested. She's clearly not interested, because once she meets Ezra, and he clearly assumes that she got there by way of her own, and she brushes off any concerns because, oh no, let's sit down and swap campfire stories. Like, no, she would be all for stopping Thrawn and putting a stop to it. Again, this character is just, I'm not sure what Filoni is trying to do, but completely rewriting Sabine, and the argument that, oh, he knows his own characters better than anybody. It's like, does he? Because like, you go back and watch season 4, there's no way that Sabine is making most of the decisions that she's been making in this series. And if Ahsoka's right that it's just, fate, like the will of the Force, it's like, is the will of the Force causing Sabine to be, a dumber character? I don't know. It's just, it's very irritating.
Well, I have to say, and, I've seen a lot of, I love romance. I like reunions. I like seeing a lot of stuff like that. But I've got to say that this reunion moment, and I don't have a good picture of it, between Ezra and Sabine, this moment that we've been waiting for, I don't know how long, Catherine, we've been waiting for this thing forever, was the worst reunion ever. I'm just not happy with how they handled this. It should have been, the way when you see somebody you haven't seen for years, oh my God, is it you? Oh my God, is it you? Oh my God, it should have been like the most amazing experience. Instead, it was like they saw each other last week.
Well, not everybody has that type of reaction, but Sabine should have given her entire the fact that she's been making all these bad decisions. She knows are bad decisions just to get to Ezra, and she finally gets to him. She doesn't care. It's like, no. Also, I don't get the logic that it's clear that Ezra isn't that far away from where the Night Sisters were. We don't exactly know where Thrawn's Star Destroyer came from, but I don't buy that he wouldn't have devoted all of his time and energy to try and stop Ezra and kill him for bringing him all the way. Or, it's like, you bested me. He's not somebody who just kind of lets those things slide. And I did notice also that, his Star Destroyer has been, I guess they've been repairing it over the years or something, but it's like, wait a minute. So you're going to let Ezra go, and he's barely a few clicks, it seems, away from where the Night Sisters are, and you're not going to hunt him down and kill him? And it's like, how many times do these people have to show you from the Ghost crew that they're actually really competent, could potentially pose a threat, until you get with the program and go put it down once and for all? And certainly if Ahsoka could find her way there from finding, the Ninja Turtle people, then which were kind of cute, to be honest, then
they were adorable. They were the cutest little things. And I'm like, this is too cute. They're adorable. I want to hug one. It was just, it was quite, it did kind of remove you a little bit of this place that's so dangerous that they said, you know, die well. Isn't that what one of the characters told her? Die well. She's about to have her hair brushed and her nails painted, Catherine. There's no dying with those creatures.
Yeah, and for Ezra to be like, "Oh, it took you long enough." It's like, well, why? How did you expect her to get out here exactly? It's like he didn't leave any because again, the fact that he even says that I didn't know where I was going, then why would you expect? Well, it took you long enough. It's like okay, it's like him being kind of joshing around, kind of funny, but it's also clear that he expected her to show up at some point. So, well, why would you have expected them to find you if you didn't leave any evidence behind? And he knows that they don't have that same connection with the Purgle that he does. So why was he expecting that to happen? It's like it doesn't. It's like okay, to me, it would have made a lot more sense if he was genuinely surprised to see her there because he sent the message telling her, "Look, uh, I'm about to do something and it's going to be really important, but you have to stay away or you can't, you know, all this kind of thing." And he's just, it's like he was clearly expecting her, and there's no real logic as to why, unless he sensed her through the Force or something like that. But it's like, well, if he's sensing her through the Force, then it stands to reason he could have sensed how she got there and all the conflict she's been, you know, interpersonal conflict she's been having over the last few days. But he doesn't, so it was very odd.
Yeah, and you know, here's Sabine's face, and I think this face says a million things. This is not what she thought this was going to be like.
No,
This, you can tell by the look on her face. I don't think she regrets her decision, but I think that I don't know what she was expecting. I think she should have been going into this as this is going to be the hardest thing in my life. However, knowing Sabine's attitude from what we've known her like, she's like, oh well, I guess I better blow up some things and fight and make sure I can get in there. That's Sabine's attitude, is I better make sure I can, you know, we got this plan in order, and you know, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going to be working on that. And you know, I can't really see the gears moving in her brain. Maybe she'll start to get that back. Maybe that will come back to her, Catherine, and when she sees Ezra, maybe she's just so shocked that she made it. I'm not quite sure what she's thinking, but for someone who, you know, was ditching ceremonies and is like, I can't, it's too painful. Um, her level of enthusiasm, I hope, is changes. Catherine, do you think Ezra has been changed being so close to these powerful Night Sisters on a planet that clearly is so strong in Night Sister Force ability?
uh, maybe because it's too early to tell because you know he just kind of said hi, you know, so maybe not. But again, I'm thinking about what is he gonna say when he finds out what she did to get there. He's gonna blow up in her face. It's like you just destroyed, you know, everything I've been doing out here for 10 years, being on the run as a fugitive and trying to hide, and you just blew that off because you wanted to see me. And same with Ahsoka, knowing that Sabine did this, and she's like, and they try to give her this cop out where Ahsoka's like, well, maybe it was fate, the will of the Force. It's like, don't do that. It's like, no, this isn't what I'm very intrigued to see what this conversation is going to be like. Hopefully next week. I hope they don't contrive it and drag it out even further. So we'll see what happens here. But I'm just really annoyed with Sabine at this point. And and if it is the will of the Force, it's kind of like of all the ways you could will things to go this way, it was by taking a beloved character and turning them into basically a dumbbell who just abandons all of her morals and good sense of thinking just to say, "Oh, hi, Ezra." It's like, and I no, just no.
Well, interestingly enough, the Night Sisters describe, now this is something else I wanted to ask. And of course, we know that Force users have visions and that the visions can be interpreted different ways. They're not always easy to interpret. But we've also heard in this episode, or at least it was implied, that the Night Sisters can see the future. And unfortunately, Sabine being here is what they call a loose thread. And we've heard that term before, right, Catherine? I think in a previous Thrawn series, perhaps not on television, but in a book, one or two books, where there was a loose thread, something that was unpredictable, and Sabine apparently is that loose thread, and it caused maybe Thrawn's entire plans to unravel. Will Sabine be that loose thread, you think, in this story? It doesn't feel that way right now, but do you think she could pull it off?
Well, I think another loose thread is Ahsoka, because he mentions when he learns that Ahsoka is coming, and again, this is another sign that the publishing department is not communicating with the writers of the show, because it's been established in one of the new Thrawn books that he knows who Ahsoka is, and he knows that her master was Anakin and became Darth Vader and all that. So when he tells, Morgan Elsbeth, I need to know everything. I need to know who her master was, where she came from, as if he's never heard of this person before. It's like, okay, another letdown from, another lack of consistency there with the new canon. But I think that's going to be a bigger loose end. And again, the fact that Thrawn has this master plan, and it's like, maybe you shouldn't trust, because the fact that he looks at these two mercenaries and looks down on them, it's like, well, then why are you trusting them to get the job done if you think of them as so lesser than you? It's like, maybe you should maybe you should handle this, because I remember there was a moment in season 3. I think the rebels were on Ryloth, and they're taking off in the Ghost, and his Star Destroyer there, the Chimera, could have easily blown them out of the sky, and they were going to, and Thrawn said no. And I'm like, I don't buy that he would have considered them, worthy adversaries enough to give them a chance to leave to fight another day. It's like, no, he would have just swiped them out of the sky. So the idea that even at this point, after they've bested him to the point of bringing him all the way out here, that he's still giving them a chance. It's like, no, I think the sense of honor is violated all the time if it comes down to logical military tactics. And the idea that he's going to keep giving them these chances, I'm just not really buying that. And for that matter, another thing we forgot to mention was the bandits who attack Sabine are dressed all in red, kind of like, the red and gold. They look very much like the Night Sisters, evoking that. So I wonder if they're some of the male members of that species, because we've seen how that hierarchy worked on Dathomir. Maybe it's something similar going on here, and they've maybe broken free of that and are living as nomads, more or less. Perhaps.
Yes, male Darth Mirians. That's a very interesting thought. And then, of course, I just wanted to show the ship, yeah, and you can't see from this picture, but you can see it's sort of like worse for wear. I don't know how many years later they're not getting those shipments to maintain the ship right, Catherine?
So, yeah, it's been about 10 years, and you can see when you look closely, some of the closer up shots, that they're using this gold metal-like stuff to kind of repair it, similar to what Kylo uses to repair his mask in Rise of Skywalker, whatever this gold like soldering stuff is. But you can tell they've still got a long way to go before it seems worthy of light speed travel. But we'll see.
And we also hear in the episode, I guess it was Thrawn who said this. I can't remember who said this now. Either Thrawn or the Night Sisters. Oh, yes. I think Thrawn asked the Night Sisters to destroy the Purgles.
Yeah, because they're bringing Ahsoka, and he's like, destroy them.
Wow. That feels like a tall order, Catherine. Are we going to see that? My gosh, I don't want to see them get destroyed. My goodness. Are we going to see destruction of just another species in this series?
Hell yeah. We need to see, because here's the thing. It's not enough to give Thrawn a reputation and to know what his reputation is, because a lot of casual fans are coming to this for the first time, and granted, a lot of them have since been incentivized to go back and watch Rebels. You need to see your bad guy, your villain, do something bad. It's not enough to say, well, he has a plan, but we're not really sure what it is yet, blah, blah. It's like, no, he's got to do something, because as far as most Star Wars fans know, he's like some Imperial admiral who was exiled here a long time ago, and he has a sense of honor, and he's working with the witches, but he hasn't really done anything yet. So we need to see him do something that seems evil and excessive for, to really cement why we should be afraid of him. Because again, in Rebels, I thought it was a bit of a stretch that he would keep giving the ghost, like he wouldn't have given the ghost crew as the time of day. It's like, just zap him out of the sky with the, blow away the ghost with the turbo lasers and be done with it. But it's like, we need to see him actually do something. And I think that because he probably knows what the Purgle are, that they are from the ancient Jedi hyperspace trails, okay, let's just wipe this out and be done with it. I think we're going to see him do something evil, and that could be it.
Yeah. Wow. And you did mention already, and we kind of discussed this, which might be the last thing that I wanted to ask you about, the notion of these coffins, which I can't seem to get a picture of. And of course, and I had said in the beginning of the series that Elsbeth was running the show from behind prison. I said yellow is the new black. And I think I was right about that. I think she was just running things like it's a normal day. None of this stuff of sort of like putting her in the prison means anything to her because she's still running the show. She's
Well,
still
yeah, because they never revealed who exactly hired Balin, Skull, and Hati to free her. Because I think it's a safe assumption that it wasn't the Night Sisters on this planet Peridia, because Balin and Hati don't have the ability to telepathically communicate with them across the universe. So I'm guessing that this was just a contingency plan that she had in place in the event that she ever got caught, that they would come and get her. Which is why she's totally, chillaxed about it. Because oh yeah, they're gonna break me out sometime. It's fine.
she is really chillax about it, and certainly her attitude towards this whole thing. One of the main things that she has been asking, I guess maybe this is part of the deal, is to transport all these necromancer coffins, which I can't seem to get a picture of, but it is very interesting to see them all go. And I think that she mentions to Thrawn, that it will take 3 rotations or something to get them all of them. And you can see them kind of loading these coffins. It's their army. It's their army that they're going to use, I guess. But I think we're in for a treat, whatever they can or cannot do. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this turns out. What are your final thoughts on episode 6, Catherine?
I think it's so far probably maybe not the best episode of the series. I think that was still episode 4 in terms of the way the plot was developing. This one, it wasn't so much dead air in it. It's just kind of, certain places it kind of meanders a bit. Like Ahsoka's only in the cold open, Ezra's only in the very tail end of it, and there's still a lot of mystery as to what exactly has been going on here for the last decade. And like, did Thrawn have to really work hard to forge like a relationship with the Night Sisters, or were they like, how exactly did that happen? So we're not really there's so many unanswered questions, but again, knowing Lucasfilm, they might not answer any of them, because we still haven't figured out why was Grogu on Arvala 7 when Din Djarin first went to get it. It's like, well, we still don't know how he ended up there or anything like that. So and there runs a risk where you wait so long to tell somebody something that it's no longer important. Because is it really important anymore to find out how Grogu got there? Not really. But at the time, it kind of was. And we're not going to do this. We're just going to kind of string it out. And I feel they're probably going to do the same thing here, because in a way, it isn't really important to find out how they got there. But I would much rather see an extended live action flashback of them arriving here and how that all went down, rather than what we saw with the whole World Between Worlds in episode 5. Because that would, at least in this case, be directly relevant to the story. Like, what happened when they got here? What have they been doing for the last 10 years? Why has Thrawn apparently been half-assing the search for Ezra and kind of been giving up? Is it because he decided, oh, wow, this is actually secretly beneficial for me, that he decided, oh, I guess I would let you go? It's like, even then, I don't think he would just let Ezra go. And like when he gives her the coordinates, oh, this is the coordinates to where he was last seen, or last reported seen. And he clearly doesn't care about Ezra anymore. And halfway I get it, because you got this master plan of yours, but it's like, Thrawn doesn't strike me as a guy who's just going to let people go. Like, so there's so many other things that I would love them to dive into that my gut tells me they're not going to in these last 2 episodes, given the history of how these shows and with Lucasfilm have gone down. So, but I am very much looking forward to next week a lot. I can't wait.
And do you think that the final episode will also be in the theater like what they did with episode 5?
I think it's going to depend on how cinematic it is. Because I would have thought that they also would have put this episode in the theater, because this is where you finally get to see Ezra and Thrawn in live action for the first time. And that was like a big deal, but it wasn't, admittedly, it didn't feel as cinematic as it could have. Like the 5th episode, I get it, because that's Dave's way of saying, because I'm doing a Clone Wars clip show, and because the fans of this show who are the biggest cheerleaders of it are big time Clone Wars fans, I'll give them that in a theater much better than the animated Clone Wars movie was. And so maybe we won't get it. Because that was like a special thing, but we'll see.
All right, Catherine. Certainly there's a lot to think about in this series. And I think the last 2 episodes did give us a lot. Maybe the last 3 episodes, 4, 5, and 6, have given us maybe the meat and potatoes of this series and what we're dealing with. Certainly the Night Sisters have come out as a force to be reckoned with in a way that I didn't anticipate. And Balin is the breakout star for me in this series. I was not expecting such a strong character. Certainly this has been such a treat as well to see that in this series. So obviously Catherine and I will be back to review the next two episodes, which will be the series conclusion. But Catherine, thank you for joining me today. And Catherine, where can people find you?
You can find me at Sly Snide on Letterboxd, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. And you can find me on the Phantasmagorium Show YouTube channel. We got a lot of catalog shows there, from reviewing stuff like Batman movies and James Bond movies and Tarantino movies and Spider-Man movies. So just check that out. They're all a lot of fun. And you can find me every second and fourth Sunday of the month co-hosting the Unifying Force on the Virtual Cantina Network YouTube channel. It's a Star Wars talk show where we try and talk about Star Wars philosophy a lot. For those, of course, Star Wars fans know the whole concept of what the Unifying Force actually is. That's the kind of stuff we talk about. Sunday's episode we're dropping is our own review of the first 5 episodes of Ahsoka, because we recorded it before the 6th episode dropped, and we also had a fun time talking about, can Star Wars fans ever really be happy, which was a fun conversation too. So yeah, check that out.
All right, looking forward to seeing that, guys. Make sure you do check out Catherine on the Unifying Force. Also on the Phantasmagorian Show. You can also contact Catherine here on the Burnettwork. Guys, you can find me here on the Burnettwork as well, also on Positive Fandom. I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson, our moderator, collaborator, and good friend, Tom. Thank you so much. As always, we are all good people for being the moderator today. And I also want to thank everybody who showed up to watch our review today. It's been fun reviewing the series. I'm really curious as to how the conclusion is going to be. Let's see. And please do join us back here on the Burnettwork and Positive Fandom for when Catherine and I review episodes 7 and 8. Thank you, everybody out there, for being here today. We certainly do appreciate you watching. And guys, remember, no matter where you are in the galaxy, always remember to please be kind. Take care, everybody.